Welcome to Renaissance Charge Videos. My name is Friedrich, and I'm going to talk to you today about free energy limited by market saturation, selfish versus giving paths. So before I get into this video, I just want to explain a couple of these things here. What we have here is a neon light. My old Renaissance sign here with the neon sign transformer, and what we have is a couple of things pertaining to the various videos of what we've been showing lately. A couple of components that are of interest. You can see a whole bunch of induction coils here. Go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 of them here somewhere, yeah. And the neon sign transformer can act very much like an induction coil, and that would be again going into the Don Smith type of system here. And you'll notice the old Radio Shack inverter here that I did manage to get a hold of, as well as a dimmer. So we'll be demonstrating that in the future. And then of course you saw this light up here, and this is one of these plasma globes here. It's a very small one. We'll be showing a bigger one later, and what you can do with that. Again, this again is very similar to a neon sign transformer, as well as these induction coils. This is a disruptive discharge here, and you have unidirectional high voltage, high frequency current. So we'll get into these all later on, and we've already covered some of them in a lot of detail here, so we will move on from all this and focus in on the subject matter at hand. So bear with me, I lost half of my script here, and I'm not willing to try and retype it all out and figure it out, so I'm going to give you half of the video that I intended. The first half is done, and the second half is not, so I may add more if I have the patience to do this. But I want to essentially show you a clip, is what I'm trying to do here today, in which you'll see halfway through this video. And it's important for you to understand these comments I make beforehand to really appreciate what we're talking about. So at the heart of free energy research is a huge debate over whether people should own, keep, and be able to profit from ideas that can better mankind while withholding such from people for maximum profits. So the answer is not as simple as yes or no, as there may be many factors that prevent people from sharing such information with the world. Some people can be threatened not to share it. Others, like we see in this video with Don Smith, felt the need to sell the technology to industry and many governments in order that he would get the technology out there. After watching this video, I ask you, what do you think? Should people who know about overunity processes give the information out to the world, or should people be able to sell energy? In other words, if you can make energy for free with some various parts in that, and you don't have to have fuels, or if you can make it relatively easy, should someone be able to be permitted to sell it, or should they give this information away? Is there a safe level of free energy that the world should be given that is more affordable than solar or wind? Solar and wind are not practical compared to United States energy grid costs. There's a lot involved in creating a alternative energy system, and it requires somewhat of a lifestyle change, more or less, depending on how much money you want to spend on the system, but it will cost more than grid power because of battery replacement costs, unless of course you use the Renaissance chargers and keep your batteries. But it's actually quite involved, more involved than most people think, and so there needs to be a better solution to the problem, or the solution to the type of alternative energy that is available. So we have offered a system, of course, that doesn't depend on the weather, the solar or wind, our systems, and that doesn't require you to replace your batteries, and actually can restore most useless batteries that are normally considered junk. So we've solved those problems, we've given a better, more efficient system, but we still have dependence on batteries, and fairly large batteries, so there's an expense involved. And what I'm moving towards is a smaller and smaller battery bank and a more affordable system. So the question is, should that be available to the world? Or should they be left with paying quite a bit of money for energy? So then, should there be patent regulation? Huge subject. Should there be such things as patents? Do patents encourage the development of new ideas? People say, well, if you didn't have patents that gave incentive to be protected some ideas, then people wouldn't bother to make new ideas. But the question is then, do we really need the development of new ideas? I mean, there's always a need to improve things, but do we need new technology? I think we need safer technology, we need healthier technology, but I don't think we need necessarily greater and greater efficiencies. And that's just something that we can discuss and think about. But most importantly, should someone be able to hold on to property selfishly when so many others could benefit from using it? That's a big idea in ethics. You know, years ago, I republished these old classics in American literature in a philosophy book from 1883, Critical History of Philosophy, the first one ever. I republished that by Asa Mahan, and in there he talks about, actually it was an earlier book of his from the 1830s, I believe, in which he writes about fields and property. And it was the first time I really considered it. Does anyone have the right to own thousands upon thousands of acres of property and never do anything with it, never cultivate it? And it was something I thought, well, people have the right to own whatever they own, right? Because it belongs to them. But the question is, you know, according to that philosopher, that wasn't true. If you're not cultivating land, you shouldn't own it. And I think there is it's a little bit sweeping of a statement, but the question is really, in life, how much should we really own? These are fundamental questions to do with, you know, politics and all this property ownership. I think everybody agrees that we should be able to own something, but how much? Should somebody have a monopoly? Should the Queen of England own 1/5 of the world? Is what some people ask, that kind of question. And should somebody have so much power over so much that they don't need? And where's the point where this line is drawn? I think a lot of people ask these questions in light of these very, very rich people like Trump, who just won the election, and these questions get asked. How much should the rich be taxed, and all those kind of questions. But this relates to the ideas. can somebody really own an idea, or should they own it? And should people be allowed to, or not allowed, should they be encouraged? Is it something that we should respect? Somebody knowing something that could change the whole world for much better, and yet control it and not give it to the world. This is what I want to talk about today. And you know, use the comment section to write whatever you want on there. So what's interesting is the governments often take things from people without such reasoning, with such reasoning. So many people feel inclined to do the same. You know, governments will often, you know, in a state of emergency, time of war, they will and have used, like we can talk about Tesla's patents. And I've got a book here I'm going to show. Get to that in a minute. Tesla's patents were violated by the government in the time of the war. And others obviously had that experience. Not that I'm here to defend Tesla, but so the governments will do this eminent domain. They'll take over properties of people to use for the common good, and yet turn around many times and sell these properties to commercial you know, companies to build malls and so forth. I've seen that many times. So they obviously have this understanding, these governments, that they can do that. So in what sense, you know, should that be acceptable? And because governments do that, people feel that they can do the same thing. They think that, why should you, they reason that way. And this is something that needs to be really figured out. Why should somebody have their things taken away from them for the greater good? And then other people reason, well, why can't I deal with this? Why can't I do the same thing? Why can't I benefit myself and others? And so there's a big debate amongst these people in the free energy community. It seems like the more people consider more of a hippie mentality where everything's free and everything's fine. They should just give it all away. And I saw this in Germany. The one guy who invited me over there was like that. Just give it all away for free, and wanted to see that. And I was along those lines pretty much. I'm a little bit reserved in some respects, as we'll talk about. But there's others that say, no, we have a right to own our own intellectual property, and it's not wrong to do that. And yet others will say it should be given. So what do you think? So how are we going to find a solution to these questions? At the present time, the general population in the world has limited access to unlimited free energy technology. Now, actually it's believed that they have limited access. Because many companies in the world that have the answers seek maximum profit with progressive efficiency improvements that are increased with market saturation. It's a little bit of a tongue twister here, but understand what market saturation is. What I'm saying is that while many companies and governments around the world have the ability to easily produce abundant free energy, there's much money to be made in selling power and using systems that are better than last year's system. So, the collective competition sells as much as they can until people press for higher levels of efficiency, which forces companies to release a little bit better technology. The people are distracted from energy independence, both in the indoctrination of false science and the promise of progress, while companies play the game of manipulated sales to profit on the ignorance, or to profit on the ignorance and dependency of the masses. So people are taught from the cradle to the grave that you can't have a free energy system. The closed loop is all we get, and the energy dissipates as heat and losses. And so you can't ever expect to get a gain unless you have tapping from another source like the sun, which produces both energy that we can use from solar and wind, and ocean wave technology and so forth. So this can easily be seen even in our views of free energy that are limited to solar, wind, and wave technology. You have many improvements that could be made upon these technologies in which the world could have energy independence for very little expense, really, but there's much profit to be made. There's a need for more profit to be made, so this won't happen. It'll be slowly improved until the world has had enough and demands more, and that's when you get this saturation point that I'm talking about. So there are yet more easy methods to produce unlimited energy, but the masses will not believe in such, even as they are very well conditioned to be a slave to the mafia system that deceives them with sensational tricks and trinkets of progress. So the masses follow like sheep because you hear something over and over again, you believe it. And once in a while, there's kind of a glitch in the system of the mind of the individual, and they say something's not right, and they get off the track and their eyes are a little bit more opened. And many times such people fall into a trap and they get carried away in one particular, and they lose sight of really thinking independently and outside the box. But the masses follow along in this mafia system where we just believe what we're told, hang our heads down, do our work in a vicious cycle, right? And so it's very hard for such people to consider anything else than what they're told in all areas of life, not just with electronics here. But I'm speaking today mostly about electronics. So there are sensational tricks, there's new toys and new improvements in the digital world in which we have a little bit greater efficiency here and there, and we're satisfied with this, and we believe in this progress. But as we go on over the last 100 years, we're essentially no better off than we were 100 years ago in the way of our lifestyles. We have more ability to do things, and yet we're just as burdened down. And we've missed the point of life by, like what Tesla said wrongly, was that the machine is our savior, we just got to master it. Well, it's not our savior, and even if we have abundant free energy, that will not save us either. Ultimately, we need a spiritual salvation, and it's not in a physical trick. But there is this sense of progress that I want to talk about that we're deceived by. And if it's just more of the same, those who go with their gut realize it and realize something's not right, which is I'm going to talk about in a second here, I think, once I lost that part. was the whole thing of, yeah, I'll talk about it in a minute. I'm not going to say it. So, just as every 4 or 8 years, governments promise fundamental change, progress, and yet still do the same things as their predecessors, the people generally get caught up in the hype until it is saturated, and the governments are forced to actually progress to the extent that people expect them to. This is what we see with the Trump winning. The people were so upset about the disconnect with Washington that half of the country voted, and many of these very reluctantly voted for a man they considered grossly immoral merely because he was considered less of a liar than Hillary. With the hope and for the purpose that a major change beyond this saturation point would take place. So, again, what I'm trying to say here is that there's a frustration. Promises made, broken, again and again and again. And actually, we see in the last couple of days, supposedly the media is saying that Trump made promises and now he's backing off from. And whatever, I'm not here to criticize Trump, I'm just talking about what people go through and what they're feeling and what are the reasons why they're responding. I have a good number of friends, and don't judge me by that, because I don't hold to their beliefs. They voted for Trump. I can't vote because I'm a Canadian, so I'm not American. So I couldn't vote anyway, so I told my friends I can't judge you for this either way because I haven't really considered the matter myself, considering I couldn't vote. But these people told me that they voted for Trump not because they would if there was another alternative, like Rand Paul, they initially were supporting, but because they thought that Hillary would be a worse scenario. And what I figured was Hillary was, generally people felt that she was fake, and not that Trump was not fake too, but that he seemed to resonate more with people, being more realistic. So people wanted to escape this mentality of the same old thing. Hillary represented a lot of new things, but really was looked at as trinkets and more of the same. The progression along the same lines that really wasn't going to give them what they were fundamentally after. Maybe Bernie was going to be that particular person for a lot of people, and when he didn't win, there was no other alternative along those lines. Somebody who's radical, somebody who may shake things up. So they were willing to gamble on a wild card with no experience in politics, who not only admits to being able to sexually assault anyone from the general population, but in essence to be able to do whatever he wants with anyone, because he has the power to do that. And that was the key point. And the people are so pent up for a radical change to take place that they would rather take a risk with such a sensational narcissist than have the political market stay at the same saturated level. Right? It's exactly the same as what I'm talking about in the political as in the electrical energy world. So the market changes with the actual expectation. Once it gets to that level, they have to move on. But the slave masters are always one step or several steps ahead of the game and end up appeasing the masses with the hype of progress. Don't forget that. I'm a student of history, and if you bother to read your history, you will see the same old thing for centuries, thousands of years. The same is true with all areas of life. In the religious world, people are given a sense by their leaders a sense of a progressive development of religion, which is easier for them to swallow than a complete and thorough solution. You'd think it would be the opposite, but no, people just can't believe in it. It's too good to be true. It's funny because we're going to talk about Don Smith, and there's a forum that's titled it, Don Smith Too Good to Be True. But with religion, that's the same thing. They don't really believe it's possible. People expect to work for something from a man rather than just receive the good gifts from heaven. Isn't that true? Doesn't pride get in our way, and ignorance and indoctrination? We are taught to expect energy to cost us something. We expect politics to be corrupt. We are conditioned to think that we must be self-righteous and work harder and harder in our religious efforts until we never actually arrive at the place which God actually grants us to be right away. I'm talking about holiness. It's not supposed to be possible according to religion today. No, you gotta work harder and harder and wait for some purgatory to change you over to be righteous when you get to heaven. You know, so we have this whole form of religion, this whole work that man must perform. Yet God actually grants us free things that we don't have to work for, that we can receive immediately. Not just in the spiritual world, but in the physical world. Who of you can't go outside and just open up your arms to the sun? Do you know how much we receive just by standing in front of the sun? And you can appreciate at least solar panels. If you can't believe in any of this system yet, I can understand that. That's fine. But don't close your mind to it. So people generally know that they can do better, and instead of just doing what would help them, they usually either just go on or make progressive steps towards the ideal goal. There's a lot of talk, a lot of idealism, but in the end, people are stuck in a rut. They're stuck in their prejudices. They're creatures of habit. An abused person stays in a relationship many times against everything they know to be true. And they just go on, maybe hoping for some change or whatever. It's easy to just keep going on and think there's progress and be deceived by that. And there is many things in life where we do have to work and make progress on, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of progress to be made, and progress is a good thing. But I'm talking about being deceived by the false prospects of progress, which is really essentially more of the same thing. When you need actually a different kind of thing, not a different degree of the same corrupt, wrong way of thinking, but a radical different change of heart, of life, of a new type of system. If we have a system in electronics like this, but it's merely closed loop, we have a battery, and we run the load across the battery, and we think, that's it, because that's all I know. No, there's more than that. And you can improve upon that only to some extent. And it's still all the same thing. But when we open up the door, we open the loop, we realize that, for example, I've always said this, we looked at the birds and their wings, and we realized that there is a different way than what we've been used to. Land travel, there's air, flight. It's possible. If we had just looked at the way God had created His creatures, we might learn something. Now we look internally at the cellular level, and what do we find? We find a whole different level of communication and dynamics and machinery that's completely different than a closed loop system. we find different kinds of signals being sent. And for some reason, the biochemistry hasn't connected with the electrical engineers. And really, if we go back to Maxwell, there's a picture of Maxwell, or a product named Maxwell here. And we see the original beliefs of this man and his belief that was much more comprehensive than those who formulated his beliefs and limited it to the systems that we're working with today. So there is a radically different approach to life that we need to take. And in this technology, we have the tendency to just limit ourselves, and I'm trying to show something different. So while it is easy to oversimplify matters, my point is that we have been given a lie from the cradle to the grave that is commercialized, a commercialized, self-righteous sense of progress to keep us all from our God-given potential in life. So we need to abandon that and let the sky be our limit, and question everything, just like a child. Starts from square one, start over again, and re-look at things in life. Now, my big point in this is not really, I mean, I would like to make that's my more important point, but with this video, what I want to do is talk about how there is a commercialization of progress. And there's a saturation point where this industry is giving out bits and pieces year after year, even though they know you can have a faster processor, you can have so much more, but the market's still ripe to sell a lower generation technology. There's still so much to be sold before you move on to the better. Why not just keep selling it off until culture catches up and we got to get to the next level, the next operating system? And I'm weary of these new operating systems and new programs that I have to reinstall on my computers. And don't we get tired? Are we tired of the same thing? You know, always the same old thing. Why don't we just get to the end of it? Well, we can. So I want to give you an example. I've been saying these things for years, that actually these overunity systems are known throughout the world by all the governments and by all the big industry and some maybe smaller industry. They have these things, they have paid for these things, and they use them only to a small degree. And in fact, there are many products that you've had in your home for the last 100 years that have utilized some of these processes, but you haven't realized really what the difference is between running a closed loop circuit and running an open system that taps in to God's creation, which actually supplies to us in many different ways energy. You know, we could talk about Don Smith and how his system, as he understood it, wasn't so much 0 point energy coming from nowhere, but that we're tapping into the ambient energy, as he would say, the energy that's all around us in the earth and so forth. And that's fine, whichever way you look at it. It doesn't matter to me. I don't really care about the laws of thermodynamics. They're kind of relative to the way you define your terms. What's your open and closed system that you're talking about? So I've been saying these things for years, that people have been, they have known about this technology, but they are selling bit by bit. They're utilizing some of the process, but not to the full extent that they know how to use it. Because why give away, why make yourself out of business? And this is what I'm essentially doing by these videos, is I am taking away my own opportunity to sell products that I could sell by giving information out to the world so that you can do it yourself. And so I have counted that cost the last year. I've made great sacrifices and actually paid the price for doing this. And it's difficult. It is a difficult decision to make, to do that. And my objective is to demystify all these things and to help everybody and help this world as much as I can. I've worked with people, and I can say this, I may not be some great technician or some well-schooled person that can give you all the math and everything, but I have replicated a good number, I'm not going to say how many, over the last 140 years of inventors. I've replicated their systems. I showed some of them. I showed the Bonita system with this the last couple of weeks. I've showed other systems. I have made others that I haven't shown. And I know what I'm talking about. I know how these systems work. I might not know everything about them, but I do know enough to be able to say these things. And so what I'm getting at is, what I'm trying to do is show people the bottom line. Not just, here's a couple of parts and how you do it. There's a danger in that. One of the things I will be talking about is the safety aspect of things. And until I will show you, which I have developed a type of shielding for high voltage, high frequency systems, which are dangerous biologically. They are dangerous. They could hurt you in many ways. And until I show that, I'm not going to demonstrate the rest of the Bonita's, his last patent, or the Don Smith system, or Capnancy system, or Gray system. These are dangerous, okay? They are dangerous to your health because they give off ozone. Even running this sign for about 2 seconds, I could already smell the ozone. This is not good to breathe in, okay? Not just alone. It's not just the ozone, there's other gassing that's produced that is bad for you. But also, what it does to your body is also bad. Even though there are many healing devices, such as the violet ray device here, that were used for healing. Actually, all these boxes were all used in that way for healing devices. And while they could cure a lot of ailments, they also are not good for the body to be exposed to. So until I show that, I'm not going to demonstrate any more of these. But it's essentially, the system is high voltage, unidirectional, that means DC, one direction, spark gap or the equivalent. Now this is the old way of doing it, it can be all done solid state. But whatever, that probably will never be revealed to anybody. the old system from 100 years ago, the Benitez system, is all that people could really need. And so what I'm getting at is I'm trying to show that step by step, but in order to really grasp it, you need to be kept safe. I need to remind you of that, because I'm not going to promote something that's going to hurt anybody. There's been too much of that over the last 200 years, technology. Jumping into something just because it works, just because it's useful, and then it ends up killing us. You need to move away from all this radiation and, you know, obviously nuclear and all that too. But the problem is, there's also an educational problem, a mental problem of prejudice. And so we need to overcome these things. Because you can't just look at a couple of parts and expect this to solve your problems. To run these things until they're like plug and play devices, you got to know a little bit about it and understand that you're working with something different. Like I said, especially with regards to safety. At least you need to ventilate, just like you ventilate your batteries so that the hydrogen doesn't build up and blow up. You know, because it will collect hydrogen, and if it has to have a place to go outside. But far worse is breathing in ozone. And it'll fill up a room in very short order. So you got to ventilate. You know, so these are the things I'm talking about. But ultimately, the bottom line is there is definitely a variety of options to do a simple free energy device that's affordable, and that easily could be, everyone in this earth could have, or at least every family, every home, or every community could easily have such a system, which has minimal or no maintenance and very little, besides having an inverter and using an AC system or even using DC. It's not really that hard. But why, for the last 100 years, 140 years since Cook's patent, why have we been generally blinded to it? It's not as if Cook and Benitez 40 years later, and you know, I can't quite comment at this point on Tesla because it's a little bit more difficult to analyze Tesla in that regards. But why haven't the general population used this like we use sliced bread? You know, why haven't we had this? And you know, for me as a historian and a philosopher, it's a very curious thing, beyond curiosity, to figure out why. You know, what are the reasons? And as far as I can see, it's not because the knowledge isn't distributed. It hasn't been given out to the world. It has. And I've shown that. But it's been ignored. It's been used behind the scenes. It's been sold to businesses. This is what we're getting with Don Smith. Don Smith showed that he was credible and gave all indication that he really had done business with industry. People are sometimes questioning, is this guy for real? Is it a lie? Well, look at what he showed. If you know enough about these kinds of systems, you know that he had it figured out. And you can see the one demonstration that he did, where he took basically a violet ray device, which is high voltage, you know, 30, 40,000, 40, 50,000 volts, and he had two plates, aluminum and copper, and insulation in between them, right? And then he ran to ground on the other side. And I kind of passed over that, not thinking much about it, until I re-looked at that and I realized, yeah, what he's doing is showing you everything right there. And with a few more words, he's describing what you need to know about the ground and connecting to it. And he just showed you a very simple device. think about it through, and you'll be able to figure out how to benefit from that. And that's really what the system's all about. Now, so people were saying, was he for real? Was he fake? Well, being in the industry myself, I know from what his son was saying, which we're going to look at in just a minute, that they were actually doing those things. And it's without a doubt that he has sold this technology to governments and industry all around the world. There's absolutely no reason to doubt that. Just because we don't quite understand his system, because for some reason we have a block to it, or we don't follow the instructions, doesn't mean we should question that. Now, I'm not trying to side with him in saying any of that, but I want to establish this before we look at the quote. I want to say that I'm bringing this quote up not because I'm judging him or his son, but I want to bring it up as something from the horse's mouth, from somebody who is has been doing this for years. He's passed away now, but his son is still in it, and you can look at their website, and they're in business still. They're still doing this, right? So I want to establish that he is credible, and also his system is nearly identical to the Benitez system with the induction coil and that 100 years ago. He doesn't mention that. Nobody seems to talk about Benitez, but his system was very much identical to Don Smith's system. If you look at Don Smith's system, where he doesn't have the coils at all, he runs just the transformer, the neon sign transformer, the bigger one, directly to the capacitors. And then from there, well, he's using the ground too. Well, this is the same thing as Benitez showed, and the battery gets charged up in the end. Alright, so same thing as Ed Gray. So these guys were all in the same kind of technology, different times. So these words that I'm going to be quoting here are from 11 years ago. From people who are at the top of their game. So what they say is very revealing. So it touches on a very sensitive debate between the common people and the controlling industry and ruling class. So this portion of the 2005 video contains the exact same sentiments that Don shared in 1996 at the Tesla Symposium, as can be seen in that video as well. I'll have links for those videos. So it's not as if he just said that at the end of his life, but 10 years earlier in 96, he was saying out of his own mouth the same things. I can't just sell small systems to individuals like I do, but I have to deal with the big league. And I'm not here to judge him. Obviously people are going to, one way or the other, as you can see in the one video where somebody actually takes him up on it. Now you gotta understand, with me, I went through the same thing in Germany. I was working with a guy, and we were showing a box, about this size, running the 0-point process. And somebody was very upset, and they were making a scene and saying, "You got to tell us what's in the box. You have no right to hold that from us in the world." And now it wasn't my box. I didn't have control over that, and so it wasn't my call. But the guy whose box it was said, "I have my reasons for not sharing it. I'm not ready at this point." And obviously he wanted to sell the technology too. And this man was very upset. And then, in the midst of all this yelling and demands, I found out that he hadn't even paid. He hadn't even paid to come into the building. He snuck in without paying. And everybody looked at him like, really? You're going to make all upset and you haven't even paid. And that is a typical attitude that I find. And it goes beyond that. When you talk about free energy, you have people all of a sudden think that everything is free. My information that I give is supposed to be freely given. So we're talking about free energy from the environment, right? But suddenly that becomes free information. We should be given this information. And that's the big question here, should they? And then it becomes free parts. Well, you must give me a free system, right? Like, this becomes part of the expectation. And then it becomes free time. You must take the time to teach me. I don't have to pay you. I shouldn't have to pay you. It should be free, right? And then free travel. I'm supposed to travel there. I'm supposed to pay for a building to show this. And I'm not supposed to be paid at all, because really, it's my obligation to give you everything, apparently. And so, naturally, you have this attitude that shows itself everywhere, not by everyone, but by a good number of people. And the inventor who comes up with something gets really, really upset about that. And obviously, they get angry, as you'll see Don Smith's son, that agitation. You can see how many times he's had to deal with that. The expectation, the assumption, the demands that are made. You know, there's a few people, and I thank them, that have helped me, you know, starting this company. Leon helped me start this company. He's passed away now, but Renaissance, he helped me out. And we got started. And it was because of people like that that I was able to continue in this work. And then I made it a business, because I was volunteering for 3 years without any money, helping the world out. You know, I didn't have to. In order to actually survive and pay my bills, I needed help. And there's been others that have given a few dollars here and there, and I'm really thankful to. Well, I'm not asking for money here by saying this. I'm just saying that there is such a demand with very little respect. And so people that don't have self-control, and they get upset with that attitude, and then they close up and they close the door and they say, forget the world, I'm just going to sell to these businesses and make this money, which they have the right to do, you know. So I know what it's like. I've experienced that. And again, I made a decision a year ago to let go. You know, if it means that I lose everything and I'm not able to make a living off of this, then fine. I feel satisfied that I've given to the world to make the world a better place. And I will use this as an opportunity to ministry if I have to. But what I'm saying is, I made that decision. I made that decision right from the start, and then a year ago I took another step and revealed more. And not that I was holding anything back, it's just, it's complicated. But now my goal is to complete this. And so, one of the other things I want to mention is like I said, not everything should be given to the world. So the big question is, how much energy should be given? And I am of the persuasion that enough to satisfy your needs. Not your wants, but your needs. To provide for your basic necessities. And that includes creating the light that you need, the heat, the cooling, and to grow your own food, and to pump your own water, to be able to live a self-sustained life, is a reasonable expectation that the world should have. And we could, with all the wealth in this world, easily. Of course, we could overcome a lot of things with money, and that's not going to happen overnight. But once people understand that there are such systems, then they'll have more and more expectations. And we'll see that happen. You know, there'll be a transition process. I'm not about upsetting the flow of things, even though you might think otherwise. I am about being careful and making, I don't want to see chaos and problems. But what I'm saying is there is a limit on people what they need. And they don't need a little device like this that can put out 100,000 watts. Okay? That's not going to be given to the world. And it shouldn't be. It's too dangerous. People will hurt themselves, but they'll end up hurting other people. And they don't need it. And so, deal with that, you know, because that's where I believe, and that's where I stand. Because I stay away from anything that can be weaponized. I'll get into that. And I don't want to be promoting something that won't be allowed anyway. But what I do have, I give. And I do share with everyone. So let's watch the video and...
Thank you very much for coming, and what would be your question?
Well, you had like 200 some odd devices that you made there. Where can I buy one?
Actually, these have all been for my own personal entertainment more than anything else. And I spent several million dollars of my own money playing with these things over a long period of time. And a surprising number of them have overunity characteristics. We want to ask another question?
You haven't answered that. Where can I buy one?
I just told you that they're not ready for sale. I've occasionally made the mistake of selling one of them, and the people that get them, you can see that it's out in the open, there's nothing concealed, it's very easy to understand, and there's no reason to destruct the device that, say, the person gets. And I've tried selling a few, and I found out that what happened to this, the person got it and tried to tear it up and see why it worked, and they could see that without tearing it up. And the moment that happens, they want their money back, and I tell them that if that's the case, please put it back like it was, and I'll give you your money back.
Where can we get directions to build one?
Actually, you can figure it out yourself. I've actually told you basically what you need to know.
A long way from schematic.
Okay.
Well, you know, if I could interject real quick, I just want to interject real quick. It comes up all the time. Please tell us exactly how to do this, step by step and piece by piece. But there's a problem with that. My father is trying to partner with industry partners to construct devices like this. They don't like it when he comes and does these conventions. And they talk about, well, what are you going to say? How much are you going to give away? Because the reality is, if he stands up here and gives a workshop and says, now take coil A and insert it into slot B, those industry partners will disappear like mist. And people then say, well, where can I go to buy these things? Well, the reality is, most of the industry partners, in fact, all of them to this point, that have partnered with my father, and he developed something for them, and they take it in-house, they're not turning around and selling Donald Smith Technologies overunity devices. A friend of mine, who is in fact a CEO of one of these companies, who actually develops filament technologies for light bulbs, once told me, you can't make me stab my company in the chest. I might have a 90-year light bulb. I'm going to sell you a 25-year light bulb until the market's saturated. Then I'll sell you a 30-year light bulb. Saturation can take 15 to 20 years. So the reality is, they take his device, they improve an existing process, and you'll see you might see a new whatever, widget X, come out that's 10% more efficient than it was a year ago. That may be based on things my father has done, but you will not see widget X that will power itself forever. So my father is trapped between two worlds. He needs industry partners to take his devices worldwide and to try to make an impact. By the same token, he'd like to just unleash this to everyone, to the world. So he comes and says as much as he can at these conventions so that those of you who want to try to follow along with this and do this on your own can pick up from what he's talking about. But don't ever expect him to give you the whole 9 yards, because even if he wanted to, I wouldn't let him. Because the reality is we've had enough people come to the table at our house and try to steal his intellectual property. And I'm sick of that. And to be frank, after he had his heart attack and his stroke that left him half paralyzed, I offered to move him with my money if he wouldn't use his money to New Zealand, to the country. Stop doing this. It's too much of a headache. But he's still here and he's still presenting to you guys because he would like to see the world benefit from what he's doing and it not just become a closet technology that someone sits on.
Well
There's
said.
my piece.
I notice you have brochures, handouts for scooters and airplanes.
Okay,
Are those companies that you would allow us to buy from?
say again, please.
Are those companies that you would allow us to buy from? In other words, you currently have your own
I'm not the absolute source of it, so.
But you'd have to contact the company that we've dealt with and see if they would be willing to sell you what he sold them, which
Exactly.
they almost certainly wouldn't. But
It fits in there.
Right.
Design.
It's
So
just-
they're selling them.
yeah,
Yes.
they're restricted to only selling the
To where?
Like if it's a part for a plane,
Right.
they can put it in their plane.
Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
they're selling their planes to.
Let me tell you about the
Whoever wants to buy
airplane,
it.
for
But
example.
it's not going to have, like I say, it's going to have an efficient. It is unlikely, but it's up to them whether they'll put his full device on the plane or not.
Got it.
Let me
So after watching the video, we can see that Don Smith's son was friends with this person who was making money by bulbs, by giving them improvements over the years. So is this right? Does somebody have the right to, or is it commendable, is really, not saying that really so much the rights, but do we commend a company that knew they could do better? Do we support that mentality? We know we could do better, but I want to make money off of you. I need to make more money off of you. Well, I got to pay my overhead, my research development, and so forth. That's understandable, but doing it right outright, I've never believed in doing that. Now, I know I can make a lot of improvements on my motors and all these different things, but I don't really have the time to. I mean, it takes time to do that. So, and I can understand this is not a black and white thing. I don't want to make it out like that. But the way this quote that we've looked at is presented, it's just flat out right, like, hey, I want to wait till the market saturates before I move up. Not when I can catch up to it and all the customer service and all the inventory and all that. That's understandable. But to say I could do better and I'm choosing not to because I can milk the people. So this is using people in my mind. This is saying, and it's a different thing to sell a technology to somebody who's going to do that because you want to make a living, I guess, and doing it yourself, as a business. So the question is, what do you do about that? I mean, I'm not into big boycotting and all that, but the fact is I'm bringing this to everybody's attention that this is actually happening. We know about this in areas that don't pertain to free energy or overunity. We know about that in so many avenues. so many different businesses that do that. And this is the nature of man, to be selfish. So, again, I don't want to oversimplify this, but what point, what do we do about this? You know? So, in the end, we're going to face the judge of this world about what we've done. It's not what we've accomplished in the eyes of man, but what good have we really done from heaven? In other words, every good thing comes from heaven, and we can reflect it and give to others, or we can hoard it in a selfish circuit, just like I talked about a year ago. We can keep this bottled up, we can profit from it, we can make a name of ourselves. But why not make a name for giving? Outdo yourselves, as Apostle Paul said, in good works. You know. So, I was once told by somebody that you should keep back a little bit. Or keep back enough that you always have something over everybody in this energy. And this was a very famous person who said that. And I pondered that for years. And this person also said to me in a conversation I recorded, the last one I had with them, that they could care less about all these people in the overunity free energy community. They're a bunch of fools, they said. Now, I never disclosed that to the world, but I wanted you to know that there are some bad attitudes, and people are played by such people because they like a mystery, a puzzle for you to solve. And they know that most people are not going to bother to try and solve this puzzle. For me, I'm a puzzle solver. So I kind of fell for that trap, I guess you could say. And I'm somebody who wants to be a problem solver, not for myself, but for the world, because that's what I care about. I care about the world and the individual. And I can understand the different motivations people have. And some people, like I said, are threatened. Some people are threatened because they're actually harming the public. Like, for example, if I took, a product, if I made my battery chargers and I put radiation on the transistors and they were like glowing green, then maybe I would get a visit, and be told I'm not allowed to do that. Or maybe you go across the line too far and you're told you can't do that. You're selling something that is just too good for the public to have. You're upsetting the balance. And that may be the case with some people. Some people may have been killed. I don't really know. It's very hard to determine what actually happened in a lot of cases. Because if somebody was assassinated, they're going to do a good job of making it not look too obvious. So there's a lot of conspiracy theory, either direction. Because everybody's a conspiracy theorist. Everybody believes some kind of conspiracy, whether it's mainstream or otherwise. But anyway, what I'm getting at is there are different reasons. There was a guy, for example, who was fired from his job because he was down in Southern California. He discovered something to do with living, or more recently, living, or tissue of dinosaur that was within recent years, or not from millions of years ago. And this was fact. This was undeniable. He lost his job, and then he fought it. He was going to fight it in court. And I got this email saying this guy was, you know, and the email went a little bit farther than the truth. And what the truth was they settled out of court. The man who was fired got a settlement from the university. And, you know, the immediate response was from this person who posted it, well, or from somebody was, well, he could have done a greater good if he had just gone to court and actually won in court, because he no doubt would have won, because the evidence was all for him. And, but knowing how the system works, his lawyer probably explained to him, and I've been in the exact same situation, if you don't take this, you're not going to get anything. Not that I've ever sued anybody, but I'm saying I've gone through this, I know what this is about. If you don't take it, you're going to not get a penny for it anyway. And you better take some while you can. And so I think this sometimes is the case where people, in their judgment, figure the best thing to do, like especially Don Smith, was to get the technology out there, the world has it, and kind of leak the basic process out for those who take the time to follow the instructions and pay attention to the theory. You'll figure it out, which is what I could easily say. If you could take the time to do it, don't read the people on the forums. They're almost all wrong. There's only a few of them that no doubt have got it figured out. But those guys who have not replicated even Benita's system or these other systems that I've shown, they can't even do that, and there's no point listening to them. But I think no doubt Don could have made it a little bit simpler, but because he had made those connections, he didn't need to, and I think he felt he did enough good. I don't know. I don't want to judge him either way. But companies that decide to... I couldn't sell you a light bulb that could last 90 years that only lasts 30 years. I just couldn't do that. I don't build my chargers that way. I couldn't imagine doing that. So I guess I've judged that. But the bottom line is we have to figure out this, because there is definitely kind of a war going on, a battle between mindsets, and it's raging, and it's getting bigger, and I'm very concerned because I don't want to see violence, and that's why I don't want to promote too quick of a change also, because it upsets everything. When people get upset, they become irrational and violent, and that's what some people want, to have a war, a civil war, which they profit from. And in the end, everybody dies, with those who know what they're doing and how to play the game. So what I want to see is a spiritual enlightenment. That's why Renaissance was chosen, which means rebirth, born again. That's the name of my company. I want to see people come to their senses and get beyond merely realizing information. Oh, I've got the plans. No, it's not about giving you the plans. It's about giving you true liberty, heart liberty, in your head, in your heart, so that you see above all the lies, not just the lies that we've been given in technology that, I'm trying to find something, that a closed loop circuit is all that we have. And this becomes your whole agenda in life, is to expose the conspiracies and this or that particular angle. No, get to the bottom line. Get on board with the true spirit of heaven and fight for the right cause. And don't fall into the traps. Don't allow yourself to become violent and defeatist, cynical. Don't fall for those traps. But sacrifice yourself for the greater good. Let it go. Let that selfish spirit of controlling, of trying to get, it's like the fool who runs after the red light. You all know it. You're driving along and you see this guy weaving in and out of traffic to get there, and he's at the next light, and you're right beside him. And you look over and you think, that all that anxiety, all that risk that you took, was it really worth it? Or you see him down the road again and the policeman has pulled him over because he's speeding. Is it worth it? Is that what life's about? Because you know what happens is when you get to the top, the few people who do get to the top are miserable because they have a closed circuit in the end. They may have their millions or their billions, but in the end they're miserable because they'll never get enough. So I'm here to share what I can. That's my life, and I hope to bring to you guys the next stage is to bring you the safety focus. You know, we talked about the spiritual safety. I'm going to bring the physical safety in that we need to shield ourselves. Now this is only a couple 100 volts. It's not going to do that much. It's very lightly. I was running it, no big deal. But already at this level, the higher level, we gotta really get this cleared up, because I'm not going to promote something that's not safe. So my next agenda is to show that, reveal that, and actually provide a product. Not that it's not hard to do, anybody can do it, but I'll provide it because I know some people just want to buy something rather than make it themselves. But now I'll show you where you can use a Tesla coil, right? A Tesla coil without hurting yourself. And then from there we will show you how to use a Tesla coil and what you can do with it. And I was trying to go against Tesla coils altogether because I was realizing a lot of people were hurting themselves. And what I was trying to say is it should never have been invented because it's dangerous. But knowing that we're never going to get around it, it's going to increase and it's going to be used. I decided that rather than try and abolish it, we need to help people know how to run it safely and encase it. And that way draw attention to those dangers and help people. So I want to focus on that, and then we can get into all these different things. You know, overunity, wireless transmission, magnet motors that don't need electronics. You know, I'm not really into anti-gravity, but that all goes hand in hand. All these things go together. So that's what I'm looking to do, and if I don't get a chance to do it, I've done what I could, and I will recommend you read everything that I've promoted, and it's all there. It's not hard to figure out. So thank you for watching this video and bearing with me. I lost half of my notes here. My computer froze up. And I hope you enjoy this video and are benefited from it. Please feel free to comment in the comment section, because we got to talk it out. Oh, and then I wanted to say something here about a book. So speaking of Tesla, I just got this book the other day. I read a couple of chapters online on Amazon, they have it. And it's definitely very interesting. There's a lot of interesting pictures here. Some of them I haven't seen before. full color, hardcover, not very expensive. But this is really important. If you're going to study Tesla, then you need to understand on either side of the, so there's people who are for and people who are against Tesla. And there are obviously people who don't know who he was. But there's been a lot of misinformation by these experts in the free energy community that have lifted Tesla up to be more than a hero. You know, somebody like, pretty much like a god is what they've made him out to be, in which they've oversimplified his life, his works, and the influence on him. And so it's very important that you don't do that, because if you think everything came from one individual, then you, when it didn't, then you over-evaluate somebody, and then you end up believing everything they say, because obviously not everything Tesla said was true or accurate. Then you also don't give the credit to those who deserve it. Tesla did not invent radio. He did not invent AC. It was even before he was born. He did not invent even polyphase or the induction motor. All these things that he's attributed to were all developed by others before him. And in some cases, you find him quite frequently admitting and acknowledging other people, but people don't read Tesla for themselves. They just read some snippet quote from somebody, and there's such a story about him in so many respects that people just have fallen into kind of like a science fiction movie and portrayal of his life. So this book, called The Truth About Tesla, The Myth of the Lone Genius in the History of Innovation, Christopher Cooper. And this is only last year. So I didn't notice this. 2015. And you can read the last section, The Truth About Tesla, online to get a feel for this book. And he actually says in here the like whatever 6 or 10 myths about Tesla. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 myths about Tesla. Now I'm not assuming this guy was completely accurate, or was he coming from a perspective that believed in overunity. You know, as far as I read some of the reviews, that perhaps some of his understanding of electronics was limited, let's just say. But what is very important in my mind is that he's bringing out the other players that preceded Tesla. And he's got a timeline in here, for example, where it shows the life of the history. Hold on, right here. You know, this whole big timeline, you know, of details, which are more thoroughly, I haven't read the whole book, but I just got it literally 2 days ago. But anyway, there's a lot of myths about him and about the nature of technology itself and how it came about. And like I was saying earlier, there's bits and pieces that come together, and people talk to each other, they publish something, they improve upon each other, and they hear something, some child says something, and it triggers a thought in somebody's mind. We're all kind of playing in this game together. And it's very important. And I was reading a book, just kind of an unrelated or somewhat related thought jumped into my head right now, was that I was reading a book from about 100 years ago, maybe actually 1920s, and it was a guy who was in the medical world, pretty high up. Can't remember his name now at this point, but was really interesting. He was exposing all the what they were called patents back then, these remedies that were sold in the pharmaceutical, in the pharmacies, and they were legal to buy, illegal to sell, and you know they were sometimes full of cocaine, opium, and what was really interesting to me, even though I know so much about the history of the 1800s, because I published books from 150 years ago, over 100 books, and I thought I knew quite a bit. But what was really interesting to me was to know that they were just as much addicted to drugs as we are today. And they were addicted to cocaine. And what was really interested in what I found is a little off subject here, that in the prohibition states, because not all states were under prohibition, they had these treatments that were sometimes like 30 or maybe even 40% alcohol. And because they were a treatment, they were legal. And people were drinking these and getting addicted to them, just like they are today in different respects. But the point is that we tend to think of those times as more innocent times, and they have their vices too. And it's amazing, the lies that were sold to the public have just kind of modified over the years to become big business. You know, before it was small business that was doing it, now it's big business. So, but what's interesting is, what I'm relating this all together is that we tend to oversimplify matters and not make the right connections. So my hope is in all this is to get to the truth, particular truth, but also see the big picture. I want you to see how these processes work, right? I want you to understand that it's not in some exotic part that you need. It's not so much in one particular combination of things. There's a variety of ways to do these things if you understand the mode. So don't stumble upon individuals or words or personalities trying to get above that. And take a breath, walk with me a little bit, and I'll help you get through this so that you can have your own needs provided for. And like I said, I want to promote more than just physical benefit in your life, but a spiritual one that you can overcome, that is more important than whether you can have energy independence. So I want to promote not being prejudiced and judgmental about people, and promote peace, of course. You know, that's the real peace. And really, until there's that kind of peace, there's always going to be a war. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.